We're going to start this puppy up. Clear, prop.
And welcome back to Tip of the Week. This week we're going to show you how you can build your own floats for your experimental aircraft. Did you know that Zenair makes a float kit, and they have them in various sizes to be adapted to various home-built aircraft? So we're going to show you how we built one of them, and this one is the amphibious models. It has the wheels. We will get this demonstration done in just 2 tip segments, so it will be a bit of a time-lapse video, and we will suppress the audio. This footage was taken from our full-length DVD, which of course runs at normal speed with a lot of verbal audio explanation. But you don't need that to see how the floats go together. So let's start part 1 of 2. The purpose of this video is to allow you to share in the experience of constructing your own set of Zenair amphibious floats. These popular floats are now available in kit form, which provides a substantial savings in cost, making them affordable for almost any budget. Watch over our shoulder in this presentation as we build a float and explain each step of the way. You can then come to your own conclusion that these are both fun and easy to build. Although we are building the amphibious version of the Zenair floats, the straight or non-wheeled version is similar in construction with even fewer steps to complete. It should be obvious when watching which steps do not apply to the non-wheeled straight float model. Also, we are building the 1,450-pound model. Other models of floats will have slightly different dimensions and components. Do not use the procedures in this video presentation as a substitute for your plans when building your floats. The floats are shipped in a single container, and this way we can get an idea of what type of parts are used to construct the kit. There's a stack of the many bulkheads which we will use, all made out of aluminum. The aluminum pieces are made out of 6061 T6, including the skins. There are a few steel weldments that we use for the wheel supports, and lots of aluminum and stainless steel rivets. One of the most popular tools we will be using is a long, flexible drill bit, which allows us to get into many tight areas as we build. Now we need to create a whole bunch of forms to build a jig, and this is easily done by using the bulkheads and tracing them and then cutting them out of our plywood. Each of these bulkheads are of slightly different size, so we need to trace each of them and make them. Here's a completed piece, and we need to repeat this for all the different sizes of bulkheads we have. And here's a complete set. We will mount them to a 2x4 so that they can sit flat. And what we're going to do with them is mount them all on a flat surface. Here we built a table on wheels to make it very convenient so we can roll this around. The plans specify exactly how to mount them and how to space them, and on the top we put a set of 2x3s, and we anchor all of this to the table with some additional supports. And in a moment it'll become very intuitive as to why we built this structure. Basically, it's going to hold the skins which create the form of the floats. This is a very long piece, 8 feet long, plus an additional couple feet at the end, which we will attach. This is basically 25 thousandths 6061 T6 aluminum skin. We have created a center line from one end to the other very accurately, and then the plans have us mark stations or locations. This will help us in positioning the bulkheads once we have the skins in place. So this is all preparatory work we need to do by measuring carefully, and then we need to overlap that small piece at the end very carefully and rivet or cleco together. We use a drywall square to make sure everything is in proper alignment and square. And once we get this all done, we're going to have a single piece which will form the body of the floats. And in a second, we will see how this is going to take shape in a very short while. We have joined our two pieces together. We have also pre-drilled the center line for the entire length at each of the bulkheads. And here we go. We pick up the piece, set it on our jig, and with a little push, the float is now taking its shape. Keep in mind we're building this upside down because it'll be much easier to do it this way. Now the bulkheads need to be prepared as per the plans. It's very important to find the center line, which is not always easy to do unless you're very careful about lining it up, because if any of these bulkheads are even slightly rotated one direction or the other in relation to its neighboring bulkhead, we're going to end up putting a twist in the float structure. So we're very careful about marking all of the lines. And we also pre-drill the rivet locations along the flange. We're going to do this for each bulkhead. And we also want to miss the dimples or the flutes, which were used to help create its shape. Then the bulkheads will be placed accurately at each of our marked stations when we prepared the skin. And of course, we mark the center so we know the center will match that center line of the skin. And we're going to repeat this for each of the bulkheads along the way. And if we keep that line level, using our level, then we know that there will be no twist in this float structure, because each of the bulkheads will be set perfectly in relation to each other. Now, because we pre-drilled the flange of each of the bulkheads, it's going to make it easy to use our long drill bit and drill through those holes and into the skin. And then we cleco as we go to temporarily hold the pieces in place. So there is a lot of drilling using that long drill bit to get into the flange and then into the skin. We use a rivet fan as a way to accurately space the position of each of those rivet holes. And here is what it looks like with all of the bulkheads in place. And notice how the tip of each of those bulkheads line up. And notice how they're all of different sizes. Now, the two bulkheads that will house the wheels have some reinforcements, and so we have some additional structures and lines to place. Here's one of those structures. It spans between the two bulkheads and creates a bay where the mechanism for the amphibious wheels will be housed. It needs to be a little stronger there, and we also need more surface to mount those wheel mechanisms to. And again, just using a rivet fan to create some very precise spacing on these components so we can pre-drill them. And then once they're in place, it makes it easy to simply drill through those holes with our long drill bit and into the connecting structure. Keeping in mind that all of this effort doesn't go to waste, because all of this will have to be repeated a second time if you want the second float for your aircraft. There's some additional brackets which are being installed right now. And all of these lines are measured carefully by simply using the plans that specify where everything goes. But all the parts are pre-bent. Sometimes we need to cut them to proper length, but there is no bending required, only drilling and cutting. And our full-length DVD, of course, goes in real time, the video that is, along with all of the audio explanation, which would be required if you were actually building the float. Now remember, this is the bottom we're working on because the float is being built upside down. So now we are looking at how to create and attach the bottom skin. And here's one of the bottom skins. It is a bent piece of aluminum, and we're going to perform a little bit of trimming at each of the ends. But again, very simple, a matter of following the plans. And here's what it looks like when we install the bottom skin. And we're going to end up trimming those sides, which are too long, and we'll be doing that in a moment following the line. And of course, we need to be careful about drilling through the skin so that we hit the center of the flanges of the bulkheads underneath. Do that by carefully measuring where we want the center of the flanges to be. And we can pre-drill this bottom skin. And there's going to be a keel, the very bottom part, and that will reinforce that area. And of course, notice that we haven't riveted anything because we're going to end up taking everything apart at one point and deburring all of the holes we made and priming all the parts. Now notice how we have marked the bottom skin at the locations of where the flanges of the bulkhead are going to be, along with the holes that go into that. And this fan makes it very easy to get consistent, accurate spacing between any 2 points by simply adjusting or pulling on the fan. It's just a method of being able to mark the holes prior to drilling. So we're going to go ahead and pre-drill those flange locations. And we're cutting out a center section as per the plans because one of the wheels will be extending itself through this area. And of course, wherever we have a corner, we make a large hole for strain relief in the metal. And very shortly now we will be installing that bottom skin. And there we go. And we will clamp it in place. And notice the slot for the wheel. And a little more trimming. And there's our final opening. And this bottom piece will also define how far that skin extends, because in a moment we're going to trim it off. And here we go. Using a large hand shears, we remove the excess. Notice that these bulkheads are slightly flexible, and we need a way to adjust them when the skin is covering them. And notice this cable I have placed through the center so that I can pull and adjust those flanges. Now what I mean by that is we're going to mark the flanges with a center line so that we can see the holes through them prior to drilling, because we want to make sure that the holes we drill through the skin go into the center of the flange. Here we have pre-drilled the edge of the bottom skin, and there's the holes we just drilled, so we can go ahead and drill those through into the side skin. And here's an example of drilling using the long drill bit, and clecoing as we go. And the additional reinforcing pieces on the bottom, right adjacent to the wheel well, and laying out the rivets, the rivet holes for that prior to drilling. We mark a line, use our rivet fan, and pre-drill the holes. A little bit of trimming on the keel. And of course we want to pre-drill the keel with holes. And put it in place, and then do our final drilling through those holes and into the underlying bulkheads. A reinforcing piece. Remember, this bottom can scrape the bottom when you're on shallow water. More trimming at the opposite end. And then the bottom at the other end of the floats. So the bottom is actually two pieces. None of this is difficult, just a little time consuming, but you take your time. Now here are those flanges of the bulkheads. We want to make sure when we drill through the skin, we hit the center of those bulkheads. And because the float bottom has a slight curve to it, we pre-cut. Clean the edges up with a file. And there's a well for one of the wheels. We make our cutout with a round corner in the bottom skin. Here we are marking the center line of each of the flanges, and that's so when we drill through the bottom skin, we will look for that center line through the holes that we have drilled, and that way we know that we are hitting the center of the flange. The flanges are a little bit flexible until they're drilled, so that way we can move the bulkhead flange slightly to guarantee we're getting right in the center when we drill. And there's a very heavy keel on this end, which goes right at the very center of the bottom. And it has a slight curve to it to follow the contour of the bottom. And we will need to pre-drill that. And our tool for drawing lines that are very accurately spaced from the edge. And we have drilled and clecoed the keel in place. We hope you stay tuned for part 2 coming up in about a week. Until then, back to building.